I am Ruth Zachrin, and I'm always honored to be able to say I am the CEO of the Massachusetts Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence. But my job right now is just to turn it over to my friend, Reverend Mark Scott, chair of the Massachusetts Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence board. So, Mark, I would love to call on you right now.
Thank you, Ruth. Let us open reflecting on the power of we. I am growing fonder every day of the phrase, we got us. I appreciate this convening of grassroots action allies, this network of kindred spirits. Let us hold on to each other and increase the we, that the us may bloom into a groundswell. There are many issues and many policies before us, a flood. No one of us can juggle all of the issues. But just as there are many roots to the causes of gun violence, there must be many roots of peace to support the tree of safety that provides shade and comfort to many of our neighbors near and far. I was born and bred in a village on the south side of Chicago, Mississippi. I can share more about that tale later. My grandmother advised me to marry a gal from down south. She meant Mississippi, Alabama, or Georgia. I took my grandmother very seriously and went to the equator for a wife, Trinidad and Tobago. Thus, all of my children consider themselves to be Trini. It was my baby daughter who taught me another way of saying, we got us. She explained to me the Trini expression, all of we, all of we. All of we is all of us, all the vibes, all the music, all the cultures, all the islands, all the issues, all of we. Hold on to each other and grow the we to address all the issues. Now, if you are a child of the South Side of Chicago, Mississippi, Gwendolyn Brooks is your poet laureate. So I close by sharing one of her poems entitled Paul Robeson. That time, we all heard it, cool and clear, cutting across the hot grit of the day. The major voice, the adult voice, foregoing rolling river, foregoing tearful tale of bell and barge and other symptoms of an old despond, warning in music words, devout and large, that we are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. I leave you with Mother Gwendolyn's inlines. We are each other's magnitude and bond. And I hand it back over to you, Ruth.
Thank you so much, Mark. I will share with all of you that I've heard Mark give parts of this. I don't know if I should call it a speech or a sermon. In my faith tradition, we would call it a devar, um, at different venues, including our Peace MVP event. And just that concept of all of we and we got us just feels so particularly important right now that I thank you, Mark, for grounding us with that and starting our meeting today with a reminder that we do got us and it is about all of we. And that's what we're here for this evening. So I thank you. Getting into a few more mundane housekeeping issues. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us for our fall quarterly meeting. We have a number of things that we want to cover today. The meeting is being recorded. There are a number of folks who were interested in getting the information but couldn't come. So just wanted people to be aware that the meeting is being recorded. We'll have some opportunities for questions and answers too. I'm just asking folks to put any questions that they have throughout the evening in the chat. And speaking of the chat, I would love it if people could introduce themselves with their name, what organization they're from, if they're from an organization or a community, just so folks can know who is in the space. So whenever you get a chance, please do introduce yourself in the chat. Um, there's so many familiar faces on here, but I want to make sure that we know who everyone is, and just be in community with all of you. Our task for this evening is actually two. I kind of shifted some of my thinking about our quarterly meeting, just given everything that's been going on lately, but particularly this past week. And there are a number of you on the screen that might remember that shortly after the election, we gathered folks on a Zoom. It was 3 days after the election for a community conversation. And it was really just an opportunity for folks to be together, to think together about what our work was going to look like here in Massachusetts in the aftermath of the election. And I also feel like I want to bring some of that energy into our space tonight. We've had a really hard 2025. We've had a really hard time thinking about how we move the work of gun violence prevention forward in general, with so much dismantling of the systems, policies, and offices that we know have worked to keep people safe. And just in the past week, with the news of the shooting that happened in Utah, and at the same time, we had a school shooting that was all about, extremism and how we think about political violence in this country. We've had the lockdowns here in Massachusetts within hours of the shooting of Charlie Kirk. UMass Boston went on lockdown, and that was incredibly traumatic. And so before we get into our agenda for this evening, I just wanted to hold a little bit of space and acknowledge that we have so much coming at us around the issue of gun violence. And even though we've had this incredibly high profile shooting that should be able to bring folks together to talk about solutions of what we need to do to make gun violence stop, it actually has made it feel like it's been harder in some ways to have those real conversations about what solutions look like. And so today we're coming together. We wanted to bring all of you together, our coalition community, to talk about what solutions we're looking at here in Massachusetts. And as we're seeing the harms happening on a federal level, what can we do to continue to keep our communities, our children, our schools, our families safe here in the Commonwealth? There's been a lot of discussion about the ballot campaign that's happening. I am going to touch on that later. But in addition to that work, there's still a tremendous amount of work that we are doing at the State House and the community with our new training and education program that we've really been able to scale up lately. So tonight is really about bringing our coalition community together in the midst of all of this awful stuff that is happening, and to ground ourselves on what we can continue to do to make our Commonwealth stronger and safer from gun violence. I talked about this yesterday at a legislative briefing that we had around the industry accountability bill, and I want to thank all the folks who are involved in that. I see Joe on our screen is going to talk with us a bit about that bill in a bit. He was super involved in helping to put that event together, and Molly's on the screen too, and everybody who helps make the magic happen at the State House. But one of the things that I talked about at the briefing was what we say at the coalition is that we move the needle on gun violence when we strengthen our policies and keep our gun laws strong, when we invest in community-based solutions, when we lift up data and research, when we do all of those things. That's how we move the needle on gun violence. So tonight is really about grounding us in all of those pieces of work and what we're doing here in the Commonwealth to move those things forward. So I am grateful to all of you for being with us. And we are going to start with a review of what our top policy priorities are for this legislative session. We're going to be hearing from Alejandra Rivera, who's our policy manager, as well as our partners in this work. We do never do any of this work in isolation. All of it is about being in coalition. So I'm excited to have Ali speak to you about those priorities, as well as bring forth some of our allies and partners and coalition members who are working with us on all of these policy priorities. Ali?
Thanks, Ruth. And thank you all for joining. It's so lovely to see so many familiar faces on this evening's call. So thanks for joining us. As Ruth mentioned, I'll be transitioning us into our next topic about our policy priorities. If you may recall from our last quarterly meeting, the coalition has taken up three priorities this session, or three bills that we're advocating for at the State House. And true to our mission, just like Ruth said, we are advocating for policy changes that not only may address some of the regulations around firearms, but more importantly, they focus on addressing the root causes of gun violence, prevent further harm and trauma, as well as allow justice to prevail for survivors and their loved ones. So, we are working in collaboration with a few of our coalition member organizations because nothing is done alone in this work, like Ruth said. And so today we're joined by a few of those who will be sharing some updates on the bills. First, we'll be hearing from Joe from Giffords to share about the Industry Accountability Bill. This piece of legislation allows for survivors who have been harmed or have lost loved ones to the firearm industry, and it gives them a chance to hold that industry accountable to certain guidelines and to allow for justice to come through. Secondly, we'll be hearing from PACE at the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute and hearing about the updates around the Unsolved Homicides Bill, specifically how that bill, provides an office under the Attorney General's office, but then also for that Office of Unsolved Homicides to be a resource for survivors so that they can seek justice for the loved ones whose cases have gone unsolved. And thirdly, we'll be hearing from Sana at the Citizens for Juvenile Justice organization about Raise the Age and all of the updates around that. So without further ado, I'll pass the mic first to Joe.
Thanks, Allie. And yeah, I just want to start off again by saying thank you to Ruth and the whole coalition team who helped us put together that legislative briefing yesterday. The partnership between Giffords and the coalition and you all who are taking time on a weeknight to listen to me. I couldn't do my job without you all, and I like to think that it goes both ways. So I just want to start off by saying thank you. As Ali previewed, one of Gifford's biggest policy priorities in Massachusetts and across the country is something that we call industry accountability and victims' access to justice. The brief explanation of why this matters, sort of where we are. In 2005, during the Bush administration, Congress passed a law called the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act. This was a federal law that sought to give immunity from civil lawsuits to the entire gun industry. There is no other industry in America with any type of immunity like that, save for social media companies, and something that's called Section 230, if you've heard of that. And we've all seen how that's worked out, haven't we? So the two bills that we are working on in partnership with the coalition are S1653. You don't need to write that down. Ruth has information she can share with you all. I think that's the plan. And then H2672. These are identical bills. The Senate is carried by Senator Cindy Cream, who's a huge champion for us, and the House is Representative Frank Moran. What does this do to open up the courtroom doors for those who are harmed by the bad actors in the gun industry? So, written into PLCAA, the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, is an exception. And if, as a member of the gun industry, you violate a state regulation of the sale and marketing of firearms, and then someone's harmed by it, that person can then bring that lawsuit. So these bills, hopefully laws, set out specific responsible business practices that members of the firearm industry have to follow. An example can be you can't just leave your inventory in your front window, right? You should probably have a deadbolt on your door so people can't steal it. Don't design a gun that could go off accidentally and hurt someone, right? So by enshrining these very specific responsible business practices, we're making sure that those who don't follow those responsible business practices, the small number of industry members who don't follow those responsible business practices, can be held accountable by those who are harmed by it, whether they've lost a loved one to gun violence, whether they themselves have been injured by gun violence. By passing these bills, those victims, those survivors will be able to access the justice system in a way that they just can't right now. The policy implications of that, I think to this group, right, the moral imperative of simply allowing those who have survived gun violence to access our justice system, that's pretty clear. But from a deeper or from a more analytical policy perspective, it's really a response to what we're seeing at the federal level with the rollback of the ATF. Prior to this administration, the average gun dealer was getting inspected every 7 to 9 years. That's different in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has its own state inspection program. That is before I live in DC, they had ATF agents walking up and down my street picking up trash. Right? So you're seeing the oversight of the gun industry rolled back at the federal level. And what we can do with these bills is make sure that businesses are still behaving in a certain way. I like to, I'll close with the metaphor that I go to a lot. How hard does McDonald's try to make sure you don't slip and fall in the bathroom after they clean it? How hard does McDonald's try to make sure that you know the coffee they're handing you is really, really hot? I think we can all agree that the gun industry should think that hard when they're conducting their business, whether it be dealers, manufacturers, the whole industry. So we had a great event yesterday. I'll stop just stream of consciousing to you, but we have those two bills that we're pushing for. We had a great event yesterday. We're really hopeful, and yeah, happy to take any questions on it. I'm not sure what the format is, Ruth, but I leave that to you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I'll just mention we will have a Q&A portion after we hear from each of the speakers. And so that's definitely an opportunity for you all to add your questions in the chat now, and we'll address them later. Or when that Q&A session starts, you're welcome to add your questions to the chat at that point too. So thanks, Joe. That was a really good overview. For others, this bill, at least in Massachusetts, it's under the Committee for Public Safety and Homeland Security, and it is yet to have a hearing, but we are anticipating that hearing to take place later in the fall, maybe in about a month or two. So stay tuned for more information from us on when that'll happen and how you can mobilize around it. I will then pass the mic to Pace to share about the unsolved homicides bill.
Awesome. Thank you, Allie, and thanks everybody for taking the time to be on the platform this evening. Always a pleasure to spend an evening with our coalition friends. For those that may not know me, I'm Pace, and I manage the policy work at the Louis D. Brown Peace Institute. This year in this legislative session, we're really championing a bill around unsolved homicides in Massachusetts. Currently in Massachusetts, we solve just less than half of homicides that occur. So about 51%, a little bit more than 51% of homicides go unsolved in Massachusetts, leaving since the year 2000, almost 2,000 cases currently unsolved. With no real avenue for the state addressing that problem, the backlog of thousands of cases being unsolved. We worked with Senator Miranda and Representative Bud Williams and Representative Russell Holmes to file a bill that would address unsolved homicides. It would create an office under the Attorney General's office that would create a task force that would intentionally address that issue, reviewing cases that are currently not really being reviewed from local law enforcement, from state law enforcement as well, to try to start addressing these cases. All of this work really came from the organizing of survivors at the Peace Institute and in and around the city of Boston. Survivors that have been coming together to create community and connection around the unique burden of having an unsolved case of a loved one. Those survivors have really led the charge. And this bill is following their lead in their organizing. We're really thrilled to say that the Senate bill was reported favorably out of committee and is currently in Senate Ways and Means. The House bill was assigned to a different committee, so that the House bill is currently residing in the Joint Committee of the Judiciary. And I just received a notice, actually, that the House bill will be going to a hearing next week on Tuesday afternoon. I can put a link in the chat for folks that may be interested in testifying in person alongside us, writing letters to the Judiciary Committee or supporting in any way. But that hearing for the House bill will be again Tuesday next week at 1 p.m. There's a lot of things that this bill does in addition to creating the office under the Attorney General's office. It would create a statewide tip line, anonymous tip line, where constituents wouldn't have to work with law enforcement to offer a tip. They can go directly through this avenue. It would create a statewide database that kind of contains all information regarding the unsolved cases, and a few other things as well. But again, wanting to really uplift that this is a bill that Peace Institute is championing in partnership and in fellowship with survivors that have been organizing around this issue for a long time, but especially in the last year or two. So yeah, I'll leave that there. But again, echoing Joe, if folks have questions about this bill, happy to chat more about it.
Thank you so much, Pace. And I do think this is a really important bill that will also hopefully start to help, garner and build more trust between survivors and police officers and others in law enforcement. And so I do think that that culture, that essence of the bill is also something important to note, as this could really create more than just policy change, but hopefully more communications and a cultural shift as well. And lastly, I would love to point it to Sana to share an update and a little overview of Raise the Age.
Thank you so much, Allie. And really appreciate the coalition for continuing to champion Raise the Age. You've been there from the very beginning, and really, really appreciate your partnership. It means so much. Just a quick show of hands, how many of you know about the Raise the Age bill? Just so I can see how far back do I need to go? All right, half and half. All right, I'll do a quick summary. And you can read more on our website for the campaign, which is, I'm going to put in the chat right now. The bill, I'll tell you what the bill does first, and then I'll talk about the why. The bill says when you have teenagers, as my then 4-year-old was saying, if you have the word teen in your name, in your age, you're a teenager. So if you're 18 and 19, you're considered a teenager. You're considered a teenager in pediatrics. You're considered a teenager in school. You're considered a teenager in the mental health community and child welfare, education, like all sorts of child and adolescent systems. Like you're still a teenager, and that was something that has been over the past 2 decades. Has this idea of if we support kids until 18 and then let them go, there's a cliff, and on their own, they can't really, less likely to succeed, because for many of us, being an 18-year-old, we're not on our own. Like we have some kind of adult supporting us. Our legal system is actually one of the last to recognize this and has not recognized this, where when you're 18, you can vote, you can go to the military, you can get married and sign a contract, so you can go to adult prisons and get an adult record. That actually is pretty problematic. Because when we look at what young people, the outcome of what happens with young people will get in trouble with the law. Sometimes the legal system is not the appropriate response. Sometimes it is. But the question is how, right? Like if a young person comes in place, when you have a legal system that looks at them as like, well, you're just an adult and we will treat you the same way as any adult, we actually have some of the worst outcomes, because what we're doing is, as a legal system, we're gonna put a barrier to everything that you need to grow up and mature, because we're mad at you, because you violated our rules of society. We're gonna take everything good away from you. For an adult, that's considered punishment. For a teenager, that's basically saying all the things that you need as a building block to help you mature and age out, and typically age out of offending as well, we're taking that away from you too. The tools that you need to age out of offending are the things we need to do, and then you figure it out on your own. And what we end up having is having some of the worst, not only recidivism outcomes, what we have is young people just entering into adulthood and they already have a criminal record. They've already been separated from their education, separated from their families. Everything that they need, they've been put on a path that like you're even have a harder time to stay on the right path. So what the bill does, it just has that line where it says juvenile system and adult system. It moves it over several years, 18, then 19, then 20. So if you look at it, the same argument of, well, you can get married and you can sign a contract and go to war at 18. Well, you also cannot get a gun. Thank you all. You cannot smoke pot, tobacco. You gamble, you can't be a police officer. There's all sorts of things you cannot do until you're 21. There's even more things that you have to wait till you're older, but we're concentrating on the age of 21 at this moment, because what we as a society do is we do not have a hard line of adulthood. What we say is we have a transition into adulthood. So things that we want young people in their adolescence to start getting into the habit of and make it a part of their identity, we want to have them access earlier. You can pre-register to vote. You can get a job as a 14-year-old. You can get a driver's license, but we push that a little later. But then things that are risk to themselves or others, we push later, because you need to be more mature to be able to handle that responsibility. Otherwise, there's a risk to harm of yourself or to others. And what our argument is, adult legal system involvement has its own harms. Adding to it that you're taking away everything you need to transition to learn to what you need as an adolescent pushes it even harder. So the bill, like I remember the first time I heard about the first raise the age, because we used to treat 17-year-olds as adults as of 2012 or 2013. That was before my time. And so when I was hearing that, I was like, I don't get it. Like, this isn't a legal system. This is a legal system. You have incarceration, both systems. You have records. I don't understand it. It seems more administrative than policy. It's actually, having lived it, it's actually pretty significant. I'm going to focus on one key reason. And I think you're going to hear me a lot talking about adolescent development, because that's the biggest difference between the juvenile adult system. Is one is geared towards, you are an adolescent. We're going to take advantage of that phase of your life, work with that development to get you to stop reoffending, and to be held accountable. But when you take that away as an adult, we're going to see your development as a risk. So you'll see, like, well, the young people in the adult system, they're the most violent. They're the ones that most risky. They're the ones that don't listen. That's because if you've ever worked with a teenager and not know how to work with a teenager, you're going to get that opposition, and that's why it's different. So I'm going to end with one research that really speaks to me. There was a nationwide study of about 1,300 young people, all of them as adolescents, as teenagers, committed a serious offense that if they were an adult, they would be subject to a state prison sentence. And then the question was, why do some of them continue offending, and why do some of them continue to reoffend? So the common knowledge is, if it's a serious offense, then they're highly at risk to reoffend. That wasn't the case, because that was a control. And over 7 years, they touched base with them once a month and accounted for everything. They accounted for demographics, so gender, race, geography, family status, socioeconomic status, education. They looked at things like substance use, mental health, employment, everything. And they're like, none of these made a difference. Only 2 things made a difference. The first was perception of fairness in a system, an authority. So all of the work that we do around racial justice in the legal system is actually tied to desistance from reoffending. And the second one was, if young people met their developmental milestones on time, they're much more likely to age out of reoffending versus those who did not meet their developmental milestones. And that's what Raise the Age is about. So pace, your bill is on Tuesday, so is our bill. So we just found out the Senate bill of Raise the Age has a hearing Tuesday. So this is the first time that I haven't even announced it to our coalition yet, because it just came out today. So I'd love to get the coalition support again. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sana. And I do believe that they might be at the same hearing, if I'm looking at that correctly. So we will definitely be there to show up for you all, submitting testimony, verbal testimony, all the works. We'll connect after this for sure. I also want to just address some of the questions that are in the chat. And so people, anyone on this call is welcome to add to the chat with their questions. I know that there was just a quick logistical one that I answered quickly about the numbers for the bills. And so I addressed that one. I do see another question / comment, I believe. Oh, and Sana's just addressed it in the chat. Great. Yes. Are there any questions that people have? Okay, I do see a question for Pace on the unsolved homicides. How do our numbers of unsolved murders compare with other states? Pace, do you have any response to that?
Sure, yeah. On a national average, about 50% of cases are left unsolved. So in Massachusetts, we are just on the lower end with a little bit more than half of our cases are left unsolved. But it is a national pattern that cases are not being solved. Statistically, even more so, homicides of Black and brown victims are twice as likely to be left unsolved. So it is a national trend. And it is part of a national conversation as well. So there's a lot of survivor-led organizations and victim-serving organizations across the country are also speaking on this issue. An opportunity for Massachusetts to present what could be a solution here in Massachusetts, but part of a larger national dialogue around the issue. Hope that's helpful.
Absolutely. Thanks, Pace. Are there any other questions? I'll give it another 10 seconds. And of course, we can always follow up via email if there's more. Oh, another one. Pace, could you share about the work of the Northeastern University School of Law on the issue of unsolved homicides? Thanks, Mark, for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And Clementina is going to be really happy that you asked that question and that I'll bring it up in this space. But last academic year, Northeastern School of Law partnered with the Peace Institute to file a report on unsolved homicides. They spent a year interviewing survivors that are holding that burden, interviewing district attorneys' offices, local law enforcement, and to better understand the issue, understanding national trends in what's happening in the city of Boston and in Massachusetts. And with that report, they offered some recommendations as to how to address the issue. Many of those recommendations informed the writing of the bill that's currently filed. I'll put a link in the chat of the Peace Institute's legislative priorities where you can, one, find a fact sheet regarding the unsolved bill, and two, there's a downloadable option for that Northeastern report. Thanks for bringing that up, Mark.
Awesome. Such good work. It's not only survivor-led, but data-driven as well. And I think it does a really good job of pairing them and expressing that argument. So thank you. Well, I think I will transition us into the rest of our agenda. And so just as these speakers mentioned, these are our priorities. And so some ways that individuals can get involved is we're going to be doing a lit drop tomorrow at the State House, where we'll be giving some materials to all of our legislators about industry accountability. So if you'd like to join us, there is a form where you can sign up. Also, if you just want to learn a little bit more about industry accountability and its impact in other states, we have had a virtual briefing on the topic with someone else from Giffords. And so it's really good overview of exactly what the bill covers and its impact. And second, I wanted to talk about unsolved homicides along with the Peace Institute and other coalition partners in the Springfield area. We will be hosting a event that is mainly for survivors. It's an opportunity that we'll be sharing some advocacy tips, educating about the bill, but also a time for healing and support. So we're all in community, and it's a good way of us bringing the State House, if you will, to Springfield and getting to spend some time in the community. So there is a sign up form for that event if you'd like to RSVP. And I will then pass the mic to Ruth.
Thank you so much, Allie, for all the work that you did to pull all this information, pull all of us together. I really appreciate all of the work that you have done on this. And I also want to send appreciation to our coalition partners, Joe and Pace and Sana. I like to joke that coalition is my middle name. And I really do believe that we are just so much stronger when we do this work together. And you've all been just incredible partners in this work for a very long time. And the coalition is stronger because of all of you. So just really glad to have you be a part of this event. And also to highlight just our approach to policy work being about guns and access to guns and accountability with guns, but also addressing root causes like how we invest in young people and making sure that survivor-led initiatives are always a part of what we do in our policy work. And I really feel like what we've heard from our coalition partners really highlights the importance of pulling all of those pieces together. So thank you for sharing all of that information and looking forward to being with all of you at different actions at the State House, which are coming at us fast and furious at this point. So good to know about the updates on the hearings as well. Um, I am going to touch on this super quickly because we have a whole other topic of conversation we wanted to bring to you. But I did want to mention the campaign. As folks know, we have filed the ballot committee called Vote Yes for Safe Massachusetts. I'm not going to get too much into that this evening, except to let you know that we have this terrific new website. Caitlin, our communications manager, has been super involved in shepherding this website along. So just want to give her a big shout out for helping to make that happen, and a new logo. And we are also going to be pulling folks together for a campaign briefing on September 30th. So if you do want to hear more about what is happening with the campaign, please join us on Zoom. Again, it's going to be a lunchtime meeting. We're going to put a link in the chat to register for that. I know there are a lot of folks on the screen who are already super involved, both in our leadership of making this campaign happen and supporting it. So hoping to be with all of you in a little less than 2 weeks for another conversation about how this work is moving forward. So excited to join you again on Zoom for that meeting. And making sure we have looking at the time, I want to move us along so we have some more time to talk about our next topic, which I'm also super excited about. As I mentioned before, when we think about how we approach the work of gun violence prevention, it is about policy change. It's about investing in community-based solutions. And it's also about lifting up data and research. And we at the coalition have long prioritized education as a part of what we do, getting out in the community. And as I always say, we will talk to whoever will talk to us about the issue of gun violence and how it intersects with so many other issues. And we are so excited to have two of our other staff members joining us now to talk more about that community-based education work and to tell you more about the workshops and the trainings that we are doing and amplifying and augmenting and trying to get out into the community. Because we also think that one of the ways that we create safety is by making sure that everyone across the Commonwealth has accurate information about gun violence. We know that misinformation is ruling the day way too much. So to be able to talk to folks about real facts and real data, how gun violence intersects with other issues is critically important. And I would like to welcome Alex Pereira, our education specialist, to come and tell us a little bit more about some of those workshops and trainings. Alex?
Yes, hello, folks. I'm Alex, the new education specialist as of May. So as part of our prevention work, we have educational offerings that address and discuss gun violence as a public health issue. Some of the issues that we cover are the connection between domestic violence and firearms, suicide and firearms, as well as we get a little more technical and public health based. So we discuss the Surgeon General's 2024 advisory that has since been wiped out from our federal partners due to, again, misinformation. And then again, we're getting a closer look at how gun violence directs our communities here in Massachusetts. A big focus, as Ruth mentioned, is really just trying to combat misinformation so that people in our communities have the tools and vocabulary to be able to vocalize themselves and speak up for their lived experience. If you or someone that you know or organizations are interested in the educational offerings, please let us know. We'd be happy to connect and work with basically anyone and continue to spread information.
Thank you, Alex. We're going to put some more resources in the chat in a minute to help folks learn more about our educational offerings. But again, just super excited to have Alex joining us and being able to really get out into the community and talk with folks about real information when it comes to gun violence. We've already made some great connections out in the community, so it's been super exciting to see this part of our work really take off. And I also want to welcome our community organizer, Giovanna Rodriguez, who's going to talk a bit more about the work that we do with young people specifically. Giovanna.
Hi, everyone. My name is Giovanna. I'm the community organizer for the coalition. And kind of like echoing what Ruth and Alex kind of shared, our work with youth and young people is to get them the resources needed and that language needed in order to understand and identify what gun violence is and how it's impacting them, what the prevention work is, and also giving them the resources to feel confident in themselves and using their voice. One of the things that, I've really focused on and is asking and making the space for young people to have their input and having conversations about what community safety looks like. And especially in times like this is something that we need to be having these conversations, but we also need to be thinking about our youth. I really reflect on this whole project of interacting with young people and really thinking about how is it that we as audience, and feel free to like raise your hand either if you have your camera on or via the Zoom chat, how many of y'all from the ages of maybe middle school to high school knew about what advocacy looked like or knew that you could step in and talk to your representatives at a state house, or just knew that that was some place that was accessible for you as a young person? So it's pretty low from what I'm seeing on the screen. So this is one of the reasons why having these educational trainings targeted towards our young people are needed, and they're going to become effective. So that way we're raising the newest generation to also feel confident, and not just for ourselves, but also for them to continue putting on the good work of ending and preventing gun violence.
Thank you so much, Giovanna. We always want to make sure we're lifting up youth and the importance of engaging youth voice in all of our work. And so having Giovanna be able to do that and connect with different groups of young people is a huge part of what makes the coalition the coalition. So I'm also really excited about that. And now this is where we are going to ask everyone's help. In the chat, we are going to, or we already have, put a link to our training flyer as well as a form that we use to request trainings. But this is a newer program for the coalition, and we would love to enlist everyone's help in how to get the word out, whether it's with faith communities, medical and mental health settings, youth serving organizations. We've also done a lot with schools, particularly in the spring when schools do their, I'm looking at Giovanna smiling about this because we were a little overrun in the spring with requests from middle and high school students who were doing different projects on gun violence. We actually ended up putting together toolkits to give to middle and high school students to help them have resources they could use for these projects. So the school-based education has definitely increased, but we would love for all of you to think with us about where else in the world we can be, to provide these trainings, to talk with young people. So asking if you can take our flyer and disseminate it, put thoughts in the chat about where we should be connecting, or please email, and we'll leave contact information in the chat to Alex and Giovanna with thoughts about where we can be in the community. The requests are definitely starting to come in, but for sure, we also recognize that people are flooded with different issues and different things going on. And so having all of our coalition community help us get the word out would be extremely helpful. But I'm going to pause for a second and see if anybody has questions. You can put them in the chat. We're a small enough group. If anybody wants to come off mute, I will welcome that. But if folks have questions about our trainings and workshops, I will pause here for a minute. This is where I feel like we need to play music for a few seconds while people think.
Hi, Ruth. It's Mike here. I just had
Hey, Mike.
in addition to the public school system, has there been any outreach or inquiries from private schools, parochial schools, religious institutions about these issues? And if not, could there be some kind of outreach to those as well? Because I'm sure they have the same level of interest.
Yvonne, I feel like we've had a little bit from private schools. I'll let you jump in here.
Yeah, so most of the connections that I've had over the last almost year since I've been working with the coalition has been mostly through public schools, specifically like the social educations classes. Um, I feel like we've had a little bit of interest from charter schools, but we really haven't had as much interest from private institutions. I know from colleges and universities, we've also had some sort of interactions and have been building connections with either professors or different educational departments within these institutions. But I think that that's definitely an area that we can continue to expand.
Thank you, Giovanna. We also have an intern who just started with us yesterday, who's an MPH student at the BU School of Public Health, who's going to help us do more outreach to college campuses as well. So we're hoping to get in front of more groups of students in that age range also. But for sure, if folks have other thoughts about places we can be, definitely we made a connection with the league as well. I'm just seeing that in the chat. So we have made, and I'm blanking on her name, but we did make a connection with the league, and it will come to me as soon as we end this Zoom. Caroline. So we'll definitely be doing some more work there as well. And then just to shout out some other work that Giovanna and Alex have been doing is also putting together a train the trainer model where we can talk with young people and equip them with skills that they can talk with other young people, which are also really excited about. So that's something that's going to be coming in the next few months as we roll that out too. Mark, I see you have your hand up.
I'll put this in the chat, but it kind of connects maybe a couple of dots. One, opportunities to do training, particularly with young people. But two, I kept hearing references to the western part of the state, which is a good thing, as we are the Massachusetts coalition, despite my Boston-centric nature. So one of our community council members and leaders of the coalition, Jenny Herzog, has a film, Hear Me, that I would say is an excellent film that has the voices of young people discussing the root causes of gun violence. I've seen it, so I know it's a good film. I would commend it to folks. But they're going to have another screening in Berkshire County on the 28th. And if I can get Chap to work, I'll put it in the chat. If anybody else can beat me to it, who has the information, please do so. But that's the 28th of this month. And they
Thank
might
you,
want to
Mark.
follow up with additional training people who attend the workshop.
Thank you. In absence of any other questions or comments, I'm going to mention a few more educational programs we have coming up. But just as we are finishing up with Alex and Giovanna sharing about their work, I just want to take a moment too. Many of you on the screen have been with the coalition for many years now. You may even remember when I was hired as the first full-time staff member. And now we have all of these terrific staff running all of these terrific programs and doing all of these terrific things. And I just want to take a moment to celebrate that. We have a terrific team, and we have an amazing group of leaders and volunteers who helped us get to this moment in time. Many of you are on the screen in front of me right now. So can I just have a what we say quelling moment that we are in this place and doing all of these things is pretty great. So I wanted to celebrate that with all of you. And keeping the educational pieces going, we have a few things coming up that I also want to announce because we're going to quickly run out of time. We are now trying to do lunch and learns at a pretty regular cadence. I know folks have really enjoyed those, so we have a couple of those coming up. In addition to a program that Mark and I will be speaking at this coming Friday with Samaritans around the intersection of firearms and suicide. September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. You will see Caitlin put together a lot of resources in an email that came out earlier today. But Mark and I will be participating in this webinar on Friday. That information will be going on and going into the chat if you want to join us. And then as we move from Suicide Prevention Awareness Month into Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we will also be partnering with Professor Caroline Light from Harvard, who wrote a book called Stand Your Ground and is now doing research on the intersection of domestic violence and suicide and some of the dynamics that we have seen with DV murder suicides, both here in the Commonwealth and across the country. So we felt like that was an important topic to really shine a light on. And so that is coming up in early October. And as soon as we have that information and a link to register, we'll be getting that out to folks. We're working on another lunch and learn that will be looking at how domestic violence shows up in community violence. And that will be later on in October as well. And as folks know, we have long worked with Create a Buzz documentary films on screenings of the movie This Ain't Normal, which is about youth violence and the street outreach workers who show up for youth. We've had a little bit of a break in doing those screenings because Rudy Hippolyte from Create a Buzz has been working on a new film that is actually turning into 3 new films because he's had so much content to work with. But we are in the process of planning a screening of This Ain't Normal that will be in Brockton. We have a tentative date for November 21st. But once that is confirmed, along with a location, we'll also get that out to folks. That will be an in-person event. And we'd love to have you join us for that. And so one of the exciting things about having staff focused on education is we've really been able to do a lot more of these kinds of educational programs. So this will all be on our socials as well as in upcoming emails to give folks all the information about those programs that are coming up. So look ahead to get that info. And now we have 4 minutes left. I'll just pause for another moment in case anyone has any more questions before we end for the evening. Great. Well, in absence of that, I will just share my gratitude again to all of you, to everyone who spoke and shared about their work and our collective work this evening, to our member orgs, to our leaders who are here. Again, we could not do this without being in coalition with all of you. And just the last thing that I want to reflect on before we go on with our evenings is with everything that has been happening on the national level, we have always known that the work that we do here in Massachusetts matters greatly. We have always known that Massachusetts has been a leader in showing not just the other states, but the country what is possible when we come together in coalition. And with all that has been happening on the national level, it just makes me feel that much more committed to the work that we are doing here in the Commonwealth together in coalition. We can continue to move the needle forward for everything from protecting the work that we have already done to educating the community to continuing to pass policies that we know will keep our communities safer. And I'm grateful to all of you for being in this work with us. We will continue to do what we need to do to keep our community safe from gun violence, to keep our children safe from gun violence, and to keep all of us safe from gun violence. So thank you for being with us this evening.
Thank you, Ruth and staff.
Thank you, Mike. Bye, friends. Good to be with all of you.